Hello and welcome to another episode of It Came From the Page. And today I am doing a book tag called the Why I Haven't Read These Books Yet tag. I was tagged by Michael K. Vaughan, and this tag was actually created by another bibliophile reads and was based on a video by Fiberartsy. So this is basically the novelization version of a tag. Obviously, I have to do it. And before we get to this video, it's one of those things where, when you're talking about books that you haven't read yet, sometimes people will talk about books they haven't read yet, and there'll be like this level of shame based into it. And to that, I just say, live your life. Live your life how you're going to live your life. You're never going to get to every good book. You will never, ever get to every good book. Even if you read as fast as Criminale, there's still going to be books that you will not read that are amazing. So, life will forever overload you with good art to consume, and you're never going to consume it all, so just consume the art you like. And also, I do think that, I do recommend going out of your comfort zone once in a while, because it can lead to cool things. But also, if you work 80 hours and you just need to sit down with a pulp book, hey, guess what? It's fine. Don't feel bad because you've worked a bajillion hours that you just want to sit down and read pulp. I'm 100% not in the, the shame category. And maybe this is all just because the first prompt is a classic book you haven't read. And let me tell you, it's a lot. Me and classics, I have not read a lot of them. And it's not that I don't want to. It's that one of those things about classics, I feel like classics are something that are really best laid into when you're in college and you're in that era of dissecting and trying to consume as much information as you can, then discussing it, and then have that oh, I read this in college, let's read it again, and then have a different view. I think classics are really valuable for that. And I just didn't take any fiction classics courses or literary courses in college, and I really should have. That's kind of one of those things that I regret. And maybe that's something that I will go back to once I figure out what life is going to be like, and see if I can't just take a course at a college course for a classic literature. So I can kind of get some of these books down. Of the classics, there's quite a few, because I would love to read anything by the Bronte sisters. Some Dickens I need to read that I would definitely enjoy. But I think for the most part, just based on what I read, and the fact that it's a trope that just always shows up in most of the stuff I read, I really need to get down and read Moby Dick, right? That's one of the first animal attack books. It really is one of those books that every genre book of a certain type is always commenting on Moby Dick in some form or another. So Moby Dick is the one that I most go, hey, I probably should read that before I die. Just because it's so applicable to other things that I read. So next up is a fiction book that I haven't read. Now, you know what? Again, I haven't read a lot of fiction. I don't read a lot of general fiction. Again, probably not a surprise. But that being said, there are a few pieces of general fiction that I've always wanted to get to, but I just haven't yet. And, Steve Donahue, turn off the video now. You're not going to like what I have to say. And this is Stephen King's Different Seasons. And this is it's like a hardcover. It's like a classic looking hardcover for Different Seasons. And this is one of the first times that Stephen King really broke out and did a bunch of general fiction. And not all of those stories in this collection are horror. I believe there's kind of one of them. One or two of these can be considered, general horror, but The Body and Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption are both in this collection, and neither of those are horror books. And that is something that I've had on my list to read for a long time. I've read a lot of Stephen King, and I love Stephen King as an author. And, in March I was intending to just complete all of 80s King, because I only have a few books left in 80s King, but I have a few really important King books left in that category of his writing career. And Different Seasons is one of those, because that's one of the best Stephen King books overall. This is one of the things that everyone says. So I really do need to get to Different Seasons especially. A nonfiction book that you haven't read. Now, again, I love nonfiction. Because when I get in the mood to cover something that would normally be classic, I will instead go to a nonfiction era, like a nonfiction book written in that time period, right? So like if I want to read, I read more history of the time periods that a lot of classic fiction is written in and focused on, instead of reading the classic fiction itself. So that's really interesting. But one that I've owned for like a very long time is Super Gods by Grant Morrison. I love Grant Morrison as a writer, and he is a wonderful comic book writer, and he always has super interesting things to just say about superheroes as a genre, and just kind of talk about the phenomenon of comic book superheroes. And it's always very smart. It's always very in depth, and will make you think. And I've owned this book for a long time, but I've never actually read it. So this one has survived. When did I buy this? When did this come out? This might be... Yep. Okay, that's what I thought. So this I must have bought this in 2012. So I have had this for 10 years and have not read this, and not for lack of interest, just for lack of me not picking it up and reading it. And so I will definitely need to do that soon, because I think Grant Morrison is a great writer, and I would love to hear just him write an entire book all about superheroes. So that is one that's definitely on the list. A genre book you haven't read. Now, I'm sorry, Mr. Donahue, but again, I'm going with Stephen King, and that's Pet Sematary. This is actually a truly true first edition of Pet Sematary, which I found at a Value Village for like super cheap, and I have wanted to read Pet Sematary for ages, and I have read most of the other like big famous Stephen King books. I love the adaptations of Pet Sematary, all three of them. I even like Pet Sematary 2. And I think the new one has some very interesting elements to it. But I haven't read the original Pet Sematary. And again, this is something I was going to do in March and just never got around to it, because I did do the entire Dark Towers series. So I can't believe I've never read Pet Sematary. It's supposed to be generally the best book Stephen King's ever written. So yeah, definitely. I definitely need to get to that. I definitely do need to get to that. A book you've owned for the longest time but not yet read. May I introduce you to books that are about 20 years old, and I have not read them. These are a whole bunch of Halo books. So Halo: The Fall of Reach, Halo: The Flood, and Halo: First Strike. Now these are all books set in the Halo universe. And I can only imagine I picked all of these up at the exact same time. As I don't think that I didn't read all these and then kept buying more of them. I have in the future. I have a bunch of Halo books now, but like in that time period, I don't know why I never read these. Because this is like in high school was like it's the time of my life to read these. I was reading Star Wars tie-in books out the wazoo. So I definitely picked these up to think of it as something that would go along with that. And no, I have just never read these. And it's one of those things where maybe I should pick one of these up for Garb August. I mean, I don't think that they are particularly trashy books, but it would be interesting to read a video game tie-in, because that was one of the prompts on Is It Trash by Criminale when he made that video. So I definitely should probably get to that. Like I said, the last thing is to tag people. If you want to do this video, go ahead and do it. You watching, if you want to do this, you're tagged. Boom, boom. I just don't know who has and hasn't done this tag yet. So if you want to do this tag, go ahead and do this tag. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, don't be too hard on yourself over what books you have and haven't read. Read what books you like. If you're up to it, go outside of your comfort zone. It's worth it. You can find things that you like that you would never expect, but also make sure you're looking after yourself. We are super big on always being productive. That's just like the thing that like all of society is like, always be productive. And we use these to like point out things that we haven't done and just get really insular and like mean to ourselves. Don't be mean to yourself. This is for fun. Reading is for fun, and reading can be for more than fun, especially if you're doing like research or something like that. But like for the most part, you're reading for fun. You're reading for entertainment. Don't be too hard on yourself if you haven't read a lot of books this year. You haven't done a lot of that. You're just living life. read what you can, read what you like, and be happy. So this is a positive version of why haven't I read these yet? And I haven't read these books because I just haven't got to them yet. I haven't got to them. I would like to read all these books, but I just haven't got to them. If I died tomorrow without reading these books, would I wake up in heaven or hell or probably for me it'd probably be purgatory and be like, oh, forsooth, I'm here, but I did not read these Halo books? No, I'd probably be more like, oof, maybe I should have been nicer to my sister or something, right? Those are the kind of things that actually matter. So books are entertainment. Don't be too hard on yourself, and have a good day. Goodbye.